and the strength of this event, it could really make you lose an arm. If you have the arm in the wrong position inside. These small waves can be very strong felt down there where you're working. And the ship and the Zodiac, they don't get along very well in those conditions, and you have to jump from one to the other. Hello everyone, and welcome to Underwater Adventures with Alex Mirabal. Today we will be talking about the dangers that you normally face when you are in an offshore expedition working on shipwrecks. So let's dive into it. We decided to make this episode because of the many questions I always get when talking to friends and some colleagues and family and neighbors. They normally ask me if the job we do is dangerous, if there are dangers, or people also tend to believe that the type of activity we do is a dangerous one. So I want to explain today which are the normal dangers that you face when working on shipwrecks and expeditions in general. So I hope that some of these questions will be answered with the video.
And I'm really excited because I didn't say this to you yesterday, and I knew the schedule that we had on episodes, but I didn't double check. Yesterday I watched an entire video about the Ocean Gate submarine, and for a second I almost thought about sending it to you. I know that you and I privately have discussed our fear of submarines, and I know more or less your thoughts on that story. That maybe could be an interesting and kind of morbid thing for another episode. But one of the things that really stuck out to me from the guy that clearly he wasn't paying too much attention is that he kept on talking about the importance of safety in the activity that he was doing, very water related and all of that. Still, that was the thing that he ignored the most when creating this, so that I just find it interesting, the relation that I watched that yesterday and today we're talking about safety in the water, so fantastic.
Yeah, well, I understand that everything related to the sea, it is dangerous in its nature. I mean, you have to be really careful in what you do, in the way you prepare the work, because you are working in an environment which you don't belong to. So everything, like, is diving and is living in the ocean and is spending time in the ocean. Also, I have mentioned in other episodes that we work on shipwrecks, meaning that we work in areas where ships sink. So it is by nature a dangerous area. So yes, of course, we need to take our precautions or safety measures, but I want to discuss with you today which are the real dangers we face. Not the romantic ones, but the real dangers we face. We are all aware of these dangers and we take care to avoid most of them.
Which, by the way, I related the video that I watched yesterday because of safety in the water. But definitely what you do is not the same level of risk of that. So guys, don't, it's not comparable. It was just, I was just making the comparison on the water front. That's it.
Yeah, of course not. Ours is much less dangerous than these kind of things. So I will list some of the dangers we face every day when we are working in the sea. They will not be in any particular order, but for you to have an idea which are the real challenges and the real threats we need to face when working on shipwrecks. The first one is, funny enough, are the waves. I mean, the waves for us are an issue. Many of the people I know, they dive in the sea when there are big waves as well. We have the people who practice surf, and they go, the bigger the wave, the better for them. Well, we have a particular situation because most of the wrecks we work are very shallow. There are ships that went into a reef, they stranded there and they broke apart. So accessing the site and working in the site, meaning going into very shallow waters where sometimes relatively small waves can be very strong felt down there where you're working. And remember that we are trying to complete a task. We are researching, we are excavating, we are doing works down there which require to be focused and delicate and that you're doing things thoroughly. So it's not just surviving a wave, but doing a job in the wave. So,
and we can see it in our intro. You need to even write underwater.
yeah.
And writing underwater with waves, it might be a little bit annoying. And that's the most simple of the tasks that you guys have to do, I'm aware. But I just wanted to mention it a little bit like, yeah, you guys need to do something as simple as writing. And if you guys can imagine writing underwater with waves, might not be the simplest task ever.
It's not. But also, for instance, you need to take measurements with the measuring
And try to be
tape.
exact.
Yes, I'm talking about waves that comes with surge. So they really push you. Any measurement, let's say longer than 5 or 6 meters between the two ends, then the measuring tape goes this way.
Yeah.
Because you cannot
Straight.
keep it straight. You have to wait for the wave to pass
Stretch
and then
it.
straighten
Crazy.
up, write down quickly with measurement you gave you, and then it comes the other one. So yes, waves for us are an issue. There are some wrecks which are particularly difficult because of that. To work in a wreck, we all know, the team, the divers, everyone know that some wrecks are challenging because of the waves. Also remember that during excavation, most of the time, we take our things out. We work with the shoes that we have. So we are not that efficient in swimming because you don't have the things with you. Because you need to walk and you need to move heavy stuff like ballast stones or rubble, the debris, or lifting heavy stuff. So we normally, or most of the time, we work without things. This creates a situation in which you are not very efficient in the water. When a wave moves you and takes you out of your working place,
takes you forever.
it is hard to come back. You have to crawl. It sometimes is actually life-threatening because you are working in a reef between coral heads and between outcrops from the seabed, and you're very focused there. If a very big wave caught you on balance or not paying attention, you could be thrown against the rocks and the corals and you can be hurt. It's not something unusual in news that a diver has been smashed against the rocks because of fortunate events. So for us, waves are, I would say, the first thing that will come to your mind when you need to work in a shipwreck. You always look, okay, how protected from the swell is behind the reef or is on top of the reef, because there are different places in the reef and some places are a little bit less bad and there are other places which are really bad and you said, God, I have to go to this place. And sometimes, most of the time, the wrecks are spread over a large area. So you have parts of the wreck which are kind of easy to work and you have part of the shipwreck that they are very difficult to work. This we face every day, and waves are a very clear point for all of us on how to handle, because they will be there. You can't do anything about it. The wreck is what it is. And you have to also, it's not only the diving, you have to go to the wreck in the Zodiac and come back from the wreck. Sometimes big waves or strong waves in the wreck force you to jump in the water a little bit far from the wreck because the Zodiac cannot get there. It is breaking, it's white water over the place where you need to work. So sometimes you have to jump in the water a little bit far from the wreck, swim all the way there, do your job, come back to get back to the Zodiac in a safely manner. So it is not only for the diving. The waves and the swell is very dangerous also for the go back and forth with the Zodiac. So have that in mind. Waves are for us one of the biggest issues when talking about dangers in a wreck. Another of the dangers are the storms. And yes, we all have seen storms and we all have considered storms as a life-threatening event. And mainly when you are in the sea, storms are things that you don't want them around. But there are different types of storms. Not all storms are life-threatening, obviously, but there are plenty of levels of storm, and in this case, if there is a big storm in your area or you are caught by a big storm in the sea, we are not so much talking about working on the shipwreck, because most probably you can't, but you're still living in a ship. So you need either to shelter in the proper place, a place that you already identify before starting the expedition, that in case of a storm, or because there are different, I mean, for everyone who works in the sea is familiar with what I will say. If the storm is coming from the north, some place it will serve as shelter. If the storm is coming from the south, then you need to pick up another place for sheltering because the winds will be coming from a different direction. Yes, you have to have all that in mind and decide which place to take to shelter your boat and protect your boat
So
and team.
would you say that planning for a storm shelter is part of your due diligence and to-do list before setting off on the expedition?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you are working mainly in an offshore expedition with a boat, with a ship that you will be leaving on the ship, you have to have previously identified in which place I will hide if there is a big storm coming.
Ocean, in any, you always, that's one of your checklists, you need to have a prepared thing.
Yes,
Cool.
yes. The same way that you identified your port of call, because it's the port in which you will go to take your supplies and to exchange people, everything. There will be a port that is reasonably nearby. Sometimes it's a couple of days of navigation. But the same way you identify that port, you have to identify shelter places, depending also on the strength of the storm. There are storms that don't allow you to shelter anywhere. You simply have to get out of there, try to get the ship in the most secure harbor or bay, and brace for the storm because they are so big or so strong. I mean, a hurricane or a typhoon, the strong ones, because the small ones, okay, you can handle, but the strong ones, I know very few places in which a shelter place will be enough. It will be safe enough for the team.
For the bad ones, I think the best option that you have is hoping that it doesn't happen.
Exactly. But I tell you, it is curious enough. For instance, in the Caribbean, in the particular case of Cuba, when we were working there, the best place to shelter with your boats was what we call esteros, which are the channels between the mangrove. They are sometimes deep, about 4 or 5 meters, so your boat can go in. And because of the mangrove forest around you, you are very well sheltered. It is a better shelter than a marina or a harbor, because the strong winds can make your ship hit the pier and it can destroy the ship. It's not properly tight. In the esteros, within the mangrove forest, is much better. Actually, the fishermen from their towns, when a strong hurricane comes, they take their boats out and go to the esteros.
It might sound a little bit silly, but for people that know about mangroves, I don't know too much, but I've seen enough mangroves because I was also born in that country and I've seen it from pictures afterwards and all of that. But the roots and the setup that those trees have to be able to root from the water, although the Caribbean waters can be considered calm and all of those things that we know, I would assume that those trees are a strong protector for a boat, being that they're all year long and they survive hurricanes as well, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for a reason, mangroves are there after many
That's
hurricanes
what I mean. Exactly.
every year. So you go there, you tie your boat to the mangrove and you stay there. And it's a quite interesting, but it's a very good shelter in case of hurricanes in the Caribbean or in places where there is a big mangrove forest. Have it in mind. So yeah, storms, even the small ones, not the big ones that could put your boat and your team in real danger, they may make your life in the sea very difficult because the boat starts moving a lot. Sometimes it starts dragging the anchor that you have. You anchor in one place, and the force of the winds and the waves make this anchor drag. Sometimes you can afford it because of the place you are. Sometimes you cannot afford your anchor to drag too much because you're close to a reef. So you need to, in the middle of the storm, pulling your anchor up, go against the wind again, drop the anchor or fix something or drop a second anchor so you can stay in place at least. And this is with the boat bouncing heavily. It is very difficult to eat. It's very difficult to cook. It's very difficult to do anything on board. And sometimes you have the situation in which you select a shelter place for a storm. The storms arrive, you are there in this place, and when the storm is hitting you, then you cannot move. You have to stay there. You cannot go to a better shelter because then you will have to go out of that shelter, and you don't want that. So yeah, storms are an issue. Hopefully there are some summer storms, as we call them, which are late in the afternoon. They are very small, sometimes very strong, but very small. Those ones you cannot predict. They can hit you suddenly. You cannot predict because they form very quickly, they develop, and they disappear very quickly as well. But the big storms like the hurricanes or the cold fronts or the typhoons, you have information about them before they hit you. You can see, you have weather reports, but also if you are a little bit experienced in navigation, you will see changes in the sea, and you will see changes in the direction of the winds in certain geographical areas, which will indicate that a storm is coming, the wind is blowing from the wrong direction, as we say, because there are predominant winds in every place. So when the wind is blowing from a direction which is not the predominant one, you should worry and you should take measurements, if you need to move the ship and stuff. So yeah, storms are an issue as well. As I said, mainly when you are living on board, when you have an offshore expedition, so have them in mind. Another of the dangers in our line of work, and this one most of my friends don't even consider it, is lifting heavy artifacts from a wreck. This can go from lead ingots to a cannon or an anchor that you need to lift and put in a ship or take it to the conservation center. Because the first step of lifting very heavy artifacts from the seabed is lifting it with a lifting bag, with a big balloon that you fill up with air. When I said big, sometimes we have some of these lifting bags which are 2,000 liters capacity, meaning that they will have a pulling force of 2 tons. They will be able to lift 2 tons at once. These cannons or the anchors, they sometimes are over 2 tons, and you need to use 2 of these big lifting bags. What I want to say with this is that once this thing is being filled up with air and is pulling up, remember that it's pulling up with the force of 2 tons. If a rope snaps, the speed where this thing will go up and the strength of this event, it could really make you lose an arm if you have the arm in the wrong position inside. If you have the cannon already a little bit lifted from the seabed, it will fall down.
And it can hit someone.
Unfortunately, it could be in your leg or in your head or something. So
my God.
This maneuver of lifting heavy objects in the photos and the video, it may look fun, but it's extremely dangerous. And remember, this is to be lifted just to the surface, and the surface can be moving with waves, and it's not necessarily like a swimming pool. Obviously, you select the best days. I mean, weather-wise, you select the best days to do this kind of operation within your excavation. You wait for those days that it's a good weather, so you can do it a little bit better. But still, if they arrive to the surface and one of the lifting bags deflates for whatever reason, then this thing is coming down, sometimes 10, 15 meters, and could fall. It is a 2-ton object.
I'm honestly in shock. I did not expect this to be such an important thing to keep in mind and so dangerous. That sounds proper dangerous, because I guess I didn't use physics after high school enough. I didn't think that, of course, if you're pulling that amount, that means that the force that it's also doing up is equivalent. Yeah, that can really hurt. It can hurt and kill someone if you're not paying attention.
It can, and it has happened many times. That's why, for instance, I don't select or I don't appoint any team member to do
Yeah.
that. We have few of us which are capable, because you have experience, which are capable to do that in a safe
Yeah.
way. Because there are certain little rules you need to follow. You cannot put your hand in a certain position within
Yeah.
the ropes. The type of knot you do, it should tie it up as the strength of the
Yeah.
lifting bag grows. It should tie it up and not
Yeah.
loose. It cannot be loose by chance.
Yeah.
Still, you need to lose it. You need to open it up when, let's say, the cannon is in the ship. But that you do under a controlled
course.
situation. It cannot just be loosened up in the sea. So, yes, have it in mind, lifting heavy objects with a lifting bag, it is very dangerous. It may seem easy because it's easy to put two balloons and lift something from the seabed, but it demands a lot of attention because you are dealing with very big forces. So have that in mind, that lifting heavy artifacts is one of the dangers. I assume that most of you didn't think about that during a shipwreck investigation, that you could go into that danger. Well, it is. There are many wrecks in which you don't need to lift any heavy artifact, but in the ones you have to, better have it in mind, because it's a very dangerous part of the dive. Another of the dangers, which is the one that everyone asks me about, is with marine life. Of course, there is marine life where you work in shipwrecks which are in the reefs. Well, very much so, because the reefs are always full of fish, and everyone is asking about sharks and barracudas. Okay, unless you are working in South Africa or in Australia, where you have the big great whites, well, sharks are not an issue. When working on shipwrecks. I have mentioned that in other episodes. There was one episode that was called Dangerous Animals or something, and I mentioned it, but I will repeat it again. Sharks and barracudas, like the dangerous big fish, they are not an issue when you are diving and working on a shipwreck. But still, marine life exists, is over there. There are fish that could be dangerous for you because they are sedentary, they are in the seabed, and they are camouflaged. You cannot see them. You could accidentally touch them, like lionfishes or scorpionfish or moray eels, torpedoes and stingrays, which live under the sand and you don't see them. In the case of these small fish, that they live in the place that you are working and you're disturbing all the time this place, sometimes they have defense mechanisms which are very hurtful. I would say it is difficult that it will get to the point in which will be a threat for your life, but it has happened. You really need to be careful with the marine life. And then there is the other part of the marine life, like corals. There is fire coral, which is very, very poisonous. I mean, it really burns your skin. You have anemones, you have jellyfish. Okay, marine life in general, they have their own mechanisms not to be disturbed. So if you are doing a work which in its nature will disturb the entire area, they will defend themselves. And you have to be careful with that, because sometimes, most of the time, is a story, is an anecdote, is a joke that you tell afterwards, but sometimes it can get
more dangerous.
A little bit more dangerous than recommendable. So that's for marine life. Everyone thinks about sharks and the fish that like barracudas, which are really dangerous for spear fishermen and stuff, that they are dangerous fish. But for our work, there is not that much. In the case of marine life, this is mainly the smaller animals or creatures living on the seabed in the place that you work, those can pose more serious threat to you than a big shark or a barracuda. So have that in mind. Then you have the dangers which are related to diving. Diving is an activity that nowadays is much safe than when started, but autonomous diving, scuba diving, it is an activity that it has some dangers in itself. You are breathing compressed air, so this will make some gases to accumulate in your bloodstream. So depending on the depth that you are working at, you have certain rules to follow to be safe after the dive and don't get any dive sickness. So although we work in very shallow waters, which will diminish that risk of the compression to the minimum, because we are in almost in decompression depth in between 6 and 3 meters is the depth in which the divers that go deeper, they stop for decompressing. The other part is that we work for long, very long periods of time, which will accumulate anyway the nitrogen in the bloodstream, even if you're that shallow, but also because normally or part of our job is of high physical activity, and that also increase the absorption of this gas into your bloodstream. So yes, the fact that it's shallow, and not all wrecks are shallow, but the fact that normally we work in shallow waters, it doesn't put you completely out of that danger. If you start working in shipwrecks, let's say beyond 15 meters deep, you should already start paying attention to the decompression sickness, because our work demands for long bottom time. So when you're working on a shipwreck, you could spend a couple of hours in the morning, then a couple of hours, 2 hours later, and a couple of hours in the afternoon. So you end up having 6 diving hours a day. Even if you are very shallow, you will accumulate some of this nitrogen, and you don't want that.
That's a third of the days breathing underwater. That's not what we're supposed to do. Simple as that.
Exactly. That's supposedly not our job. But okay, it is a danger that is implicit in every diving job, not only for archaeology, but it's something else that we have to have in mind and take into account and look after ourselves. Sometimes after a week working many hours a day, you have to set what we call a cleaning day. So it's a day you don't dive. You do other stuff, and you shouldn't also go drinking and going to the bars because it's a cleaning day. Your nitrogen should go out of the body, but you have to stop just because of cleaning your bloodstream from the residual nitrogen that you acquire during so many dive hours, even in shallow water. You have also to calculate within your expedition that if you need to fly afterwards, you will need a couple of days of cleaning up your bloodstream from the residual nitrogen, so you don't get into a risk. Normally, nowadays with the computers, they keep track on all that. They will let you know when you can fly or not. So these are dangers that you are faced in this work, not because of the type of work, just because it's diving. Plus, any other danger you can see in diving, which is like drowning, is one of the most dangerous stuff that could happen to you. Yeah, well, okay, that could happen as well if you are in an archaeological expedition. Okay, and the last that I will mention today, it may surprise most of you. It is the Zodiac. The Zodiac, the tender that you need to use to go from your expedition boat to the shipwreck and coming back, or from land to the wreck and coming back. Because 90% of the accidents that we have had in our expeditions are in the moment of boarding the Zodiac or taking your gear out of the Zodiac. Remember that sometimes the sea is rough. The ship and the Zodiac, they don't get along very well in those conditions, and you have to jump from one to the other. Bottles, the dive bottles, they are heavy, they can fall on you. You have a lot of lead weights and hammers and chisels and heavy gear that you need to transport from one place to the other. In the Zodiac, you take the water pump and you take your hoses. And I mean, there is a lot of activity happening in the zodiac. So most of the accidents are in that moment of the zodiac, boarding and coming out of the zodiac as well. Another of the dangers is when you have a boat operator which is not very experienced, it could run you over with the outboard engine when you jump in the water. Yeah, you're laughing because it sounds like very obvious that it shouldn't happen, of course. But you are going, remember, he's taking you to a place where the waves break. And he has to drop you there and then get out of there. If you miscalculate the moment in doing that, the guy could get nervous and rev the engine to go out of this, and you still be too close to the boat and it can cut you with the propeller. It has happened more than once. Fortunately, in my expedition, only once, and it was a total irresponsible behavior from the boat operator and the diver both, but it happened. It could kill you. It didn't happen. It was just a cut in his thigh, but it is a very dangerous thing to do.
I'm a little bit surprised in the sense of like, I wouldn't expect that, being that the Zodiac is not as low and doesn't have a draft like a boat and it's not all of those things. But I guess if you really do it too fast, if you literally do not wait 10 minutes or 2 minutes for the diver to go a little bit deeper, wow, you really have to be in a hurry and really responsible, I think, to do it so fast.
If you are a boatman that have no experience and you miscalculate the next wave that is coming to you, it is easy that you get scared and you get into survival mode and you rev the engine. And if you don't have experience, you will not check if the diver is already far enough from your boat or is it not in the front of your boat and you will go over him. So yeah, I mentioned this because when people think about the dangers that we go through in our work, I assume that most of them never consider the entire operation around the Zodiac, like going into the Zodiac, coming out of the Zodiac with heavy gear in rough weather and the boat moving and the Zodiac moving. Well, it is, trust me, it is the most dangerous place in an operation.
I wouldn't have found it like that, and I guess I would be even more shocked now if you hadn't told me about the mechanism that you have yourself when getting in and out of the boat and in and out of the Zodiac, of paying attention, of having your mask and not taking everything off and being confident and comfortable. All dangers are done, all of that. I think that only because you told me that story that I just butchered, and maybe we will put it in some episode if you guys are curious, because I said a lot and I said nothing with this, but that's the only reason why I'm not super duper surprised that you tell me like the Zodiac is involved in some of the most dangerous parts of the job. And another thing that I was going to add on to that from the beginning of when you started talking is that all of the things that you were enumerating that go inside the Zodiac for when you go to work, the only thing that was soft in that list was probably the lifting bag, which can also harm you. So nothing, guys, everything can harm you.
The softer thing you have in the Zodiac is yourself.
It's you. It's your muscles.
You really have to pay attention. Exactly, it's your flesh, so you really have to pay attention. Oh, guys, I wanted to share this with you because, as I said in the beginning of the video, many people ask me if you, by any chance, consider that there are other things which are dangerous, or there was something I didn't mention, or something that really surprised you. Leave it in the comment section that we are checking all the time, and we will try to give you an answer or maybe to include it in another episode. So I hope that you liked the video. If you did like it, leave it a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it, share the video with your friends, and let's keep on diving.